So my name is Jennifer Ogunyemi, and I'm the founder of Sisters in Business. And I've been doing that for about 5 years now. But most importantly, I'm a mum of four. Four big children and little children, and also a wife. So yeah, you know, the traditional roles that we have. So yeah, that's me. So grew up in Essex, in Chingford, born and raised. Mum is of mixed heritage, so she's half English and half Nigerian, and my dad's Nigerian. So we grew up in an estate where it was mixed, you know, mixed ethnicities, predominantly black, but still, you know, we had the Somali community, we had the Pakistani community. And when I think about my childhood, our next door neighbour was actually Bangladeshi, but I never knew that until a little later on in life. But they were our immediate neighbours, and we also had Jamaican neighbours. So yeah, we grew up in a really multicultural estate, had a really multicultural family. Literally, you know, there's us that we're black, and we have cousins who are white. So yeah, it was an interesting upbringing. So we were from the Christian faith, more specifically the African Christians faith, which every Sunday we wear the white long gowns and the white hats. I can relate that a little bit to the Sufism, and how they practiced Islam is very, very similar to how we practice Christianity. I mean, the faith was a big part of me growing up. It's every Sunday, it's the celebrations, the birthdays, the christenings. It's a big major part of our life, and I enjoyed going to church. It was, you know, the food after, it was the community, it was the parties, it was the children, it was the youth. Church was very enjoyable. So that played a massive part into my life, because that shaped my view on God, and that shaped my faith, in the sense that, you know that there's God that exists, but I felt God existed, not just he existed, but I felt it, because we were quite spiritual in the way that we will practice our Christianity. So it played a huge part for a very long time. So my mum is very spiritual, what we call prophetess. You know, is what it is, prophetess. They believe that they receive the message from God, and they have to then go out to the people and deliver it to the people. So my mum's faith was really key in our upbringing. My stepdad, he was also very spiritual. He was the choir master, so, you know, making sure that the songs were right on a Sunday, making sure that the choir was, you know, in harmony and everything. But that played a big part, because then it meant that we knew that every Sunday both parents had a key part in the church. So we were key children in the church. But yeah, it brings so much good memories back, until it started to break down, my parents' relationship. But yeah, so much good memories. So early teens, I experienced the breakdown relationship between my stepdad and my mum. And my stepdad was our stability in the relationship in the house, in terms of having a parent that was working, in terms of having a parent that was really looking out for you. I didn't have a relationship with my biological father, so my stepdad really took that role. And actually, for a long time, until my early teens, I didn't know that he wasn't my biological dad. It was only when I reached 13 is when I found out that he wasn't our blood dad. But there was still a part of me that could not call him dad, because he played such a pivotal role in the stability, in the providing, in making sure that he felt like he made us feel like we were his own. There was never any separation. By the time I got to age 16, I became homeless. So my mum kicked me out, and I became homeless. I was homeless on the street for a year. And at that time is when my faith in Christianity really started to shake. I really started to question, am I in the right faith? I started to question, is this faith for me? But then I also started to question the community aspect of it. You know, turning to the community because you need help, and they're turning their backs on you. That was really hard for me, and that really shook me, because I didn't feel any of that up until that point. And coming from the African culture, if your mum's kicked you out, then you have done something wrong. So you are the one to blame, why you are now on the street, why you're no longer allowed to be at home. And that was hard. It was really, really hard to hear the church and members of the church say that to me. So yeah, it started to shake at that point. It was a complete struggle. It was a complete struggle, because I had nothing. I didn't have no money. I had the clothes on my back. So going to the church meant everything because I needed the help. I needed food. I needed shelter. I needed love. I needed security. And they couldn't give that to me. I became the black sheep. Stay away from her if you don't want your children to be like that. Without fully understanding why I was in that position in the first place. So it was hard because you've come from having everything to being kicked out and having nothing. And then to then go to the place where you call home, which is the church, and still not having anything. I didn't do anything. And I think that's what has shaped me today, because I recognize when something isn't right, you don't need to be active when something is right. Sometimes it's about taking that step back and assessing where you are and being grateful for where you are and accepting where you are. I think that's what's made me to where I am today. So yeah, it was just about, for me, standing still for that moment. And I had to stand still because I was homeless for a year. So it's not like I could have done anything or gone anywhere until the council found out that I was, 16, verging on to 17. I was doing bus rides up and down from one area into another just to burn time. And they caught that, and that's when I started to get help from the council. But it was difficult because there was no dependents that I had. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't, anything that they would deem as high risk at that point, apart from the fact that I was just young and roaming the street. And so when I got to about 16 and a half, almost 17, I then started sleeping in friends' university dorm rooms until I got caught and then get kicked out. Sleeping in friends' rooms without their parents knowing, and when they find out, you got to go. So, I couldn't do anything. And, when I look back, I'm grateful that I couldn't do anything, because I think that's what shaped my mindset and my mentality now to never ever being afraid to start again, wherever it is, whether it's starting a new job, a new business, or just meeting new people. I'm not afraid of that because I've had to do it, at one point. Then I got to 17. And then, like I said, the council found out that I was homeless, and then they put me in a hostel. But the hostel I was in was mental health, teenage pregnancy, alcohol dependent, drug dependent people. And that was difficult because I've never ever come across people like this. I've come from Chinkford, working class people, or, mothers who were at home. So that was really scary, to be living in the same building as people who you can actively hear were having issues. And someone like me, who I wouldn't say I had any issues apart from being homeless, it was scary. I then went on to live on £5 Tesco vouchers. Now that was the hardest because I had to go to Tesco. I couldn't be a penny under or a penny over. And so it meant that I had to live on Tesco branded things. So I bought the staples like bread, tuna, noodles, and I really learned how to make, like tuna sauce, for instance, to put on noodles. And again, that started shaping the whole culinary side of me, because I never cooked before. There was no reason for me to cook. So yeah, that was a tough time. And when I remember that time, I only remember the feeling that overcomes me is a feeling of appreciativeness. Like, I appreciate everything. I never ever take anything for granted. So yeah, it was a time that was hard. It was a time that definitely began to shape me into achieving the things that I went on to achieve. I had gone from being homeless to not being homeless. I had then gone from seeking a new religion because I felt there was so much rage inside me. There was so much anger from the situation. And if I'm being completely honest, nothing really started to change until many years after the Shahada and after the birth of my first child and getting married. I was living in this feeling of the world doesn't care about me. And so therefore I don't care about anything or anyone in the world. And even though I had a child at the time, I was still living the life of someone that didn't care. You know, so I was still being angry. I was still lashing out physically at people, you know, getting into physical fights and getting into verbal altercations and not really caring about the consequences of that. You know, the fact that I've got a young child with me and I'm physically fighting in the street, or, you know, I'm being verbally abusive to someone that's older than me, because I just had a lot of anger. I was angry at the fact that, you know, why me? Why did it happen to me? It didn't have to happen to me. And also angry at the fact that, you know, I then started to live this life of, why is it anything that I want to achieve, I just can't move to start to achieve it? So I felt stuck for a very, very long time. And so when I took my Shahada, for me, my Shahada was the point of getting a little bit of light, that grounding that I needed, that real, you know, like a parent putting in discipline. That's what the Shahada done for me. It gave me discipline. So it gave me basic ground rules to work by, but also it disciplined me in the way that I use my tongue, in the way that I use my hands to physically attack someone. But also it grounded me in the sense that I'm now a parent with responsibilities, a parent that has to have sense, because I was walking around with no sense, but also I'm now attached to somebody, being someone's wife, and in my culture, meaning that you have to be better, because if that family finds out that you're a vulnerable person, it leads to a whole nother level of vulnerability. I was doing the bus rides, and this day I was completely broken. I was crying the whole day. And I remember getting on the bus and seeing two sisters, and one was reading a book, and I didn't have anything. So I just went up to her. I said, "What are you reading?" And at that time, I didn't know it was a book about Islam. I wasn't even interested. I just needed to have a conversation. I think I had so much to offload that using her was the perfect opportunity. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. Completely different faith. So, you know, you're on the bus and, you know, you'll probably forget about me. So I said, "You know, what book are you reading?" She told me the book she was, she said to me, "Oh yeah, you can have it." So she gave it to me. Now, during that giving it to me, she also gave me her number. She said, "Any questions you have, call me and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions." Carried on our conversation. I got off the bus, she got off her stop, and I continued the bus ride to the last stop. Got back to the hostel and I put the book down. The next day I picked it up. And when I picked it up is when I realised that it's a book about Islam. And then I was like, oh, because when I was growing up, you're not allowed to talk about Muslims. You're not allowed to talk about Islam. It's not something that, you know, because we're Christian, you stay with your faith, you stay with your people. And I started reading this book. The book became my best friend to the point that the pages stuck together from all the tears that I would cry when reading the book. And I think the book became a point of release in just understanding that there is something that can give me what I felt Christianity gave me. So this book was stuck together, the pages were stuck together. At the time, my partner, who's my husband now, he didn't know I had the book, and I didn't say anything to him either. Until one day I just got tired of hiding. I said, "Look, I'm reading this book." And he said, "Well, why didn't you ask me?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm Muslim." And I, honestly, for the whole time that we were together, I didn't even know that he was Muslim. He would go to the masjid to pray, but I was never with him, and he would go do that on his own. But he never prayed salah in front of me. He never really done any of that. So me learning that he was Muslim brought a new fear on me, because I was like, well, we're not even allowed to talk to Muslims in you know, in that sense. So he was like, "Why didn't you ask me?" Then, you know, I had to talk to him, but all this time I couldn't get through to the sister who gave me her number. So I had all these questions I wanted to ask her, but I could never get through to her. So anyway, I tried to explain to him that, look, this sister, this is what she looks like. He was like, "She could be anyone." You're talking about 1,000 people in the world right now. So I said, "You know what, forget it. We'll continue with reading the book and we'll go on like that." Became pregnant with my first child. And 4 weeks before I gave birth, I just said to him, "Take me to the mosque. I want to take my Shahada." And I think he was quite surprised, because there was no indication before that or after that, but there was a lot on my mind in bringing a child into the world with two different religions. One, you know, I'm one and the dad's one. And I didn't want that. I just wanted us to be all one, but without the intention of actually practicing the faith. So just become Muslim and not practice. So went to the mosque and I was completely blown away, because I walked into a mosque full of black Muslim women. who were from my country, my culture, my language, but they were Muslim. And I remember taking a big deep breath and just thinking to myself, I'm home. Because these are people who look like me. These are people that existed that I never knew existed. The only Muslim people that I knew was my Bangladeshi neighbour who didn't wear hijab, so I didn't have that, that physical representation of Islam. And a few of the Somali aunties in the community. But again, there were Somali aunties who were quite educated and was working in corporate, so there just wasn't traditional, Islam. And I just remember saying that I'm home. Took the Shahada at the front, that asked me all the questions, was you coerced, was you forced, blah, blah, blah. I took my Shahada and I retreated to the back of the mosque. Now that day it was busy because there was another sister who was celebrating the birth of her child. So it was really busy, lots of food and, so afterwards I had a lot of congratulations, welcome, etc., etc. So I was looking down, had this big belly, I was looking down, I was just contemplating of what I had just done. And I looked up and someone had flashed in front of my eyes. And I thought, oh, that face looks familiar. And I saw her again. And then we both stopped. And I said to her, I've been looking for you for the past 9 months. She's the one that gave me the book that was in the mosque. And she said to me, I've been looking for you as well, and I don't know what happened. But the thing that really shocked me was her and my husband grew up together in the mosque. And how that came back to the fact that the community that then accepted me, that where I started, is where the dawah came from, without her even realising that the dawah came from there. And I just remember falling into her arms and just saying to her that, look, I'm Muslim now. It was because of the book. I'm really happy, etc., etc. And then, her and my husband, it was a lot of laughter because I would say to my husband, it was her I was trying to tell you. And yeah, so he was completely shocked. He was completely shocked. And that's when, for me, that my faith in Islam became cemented because I was home to a group of people that looked like me. But it was familiar because she was the one that gave me something that ignited the curiosity in Islam. So I would really say it was around that time that my spiritual faith started to grow. And then throughout the time that I had my child and got married, and then I started to really take Islam seriously, up until a year later, and then I started to cover. I think it's different because you have an appreciation of being given a gift, and that gift also representing something that is something of the bigger picture. So where I am now and the work that I do now, but it's a gift, and I think you treat a gift differently to something that you just ordinarily would have, which is how I see it. That born Muslims, you have that, you've been brought up with it. The Quran and the teachings of Islam, you have it. It's at your fingertips. But with someone like me, it's a gift. Allah chose me out of millions of other people to give this gift to. And not only that, but he also gave me the gift of understanding what that gift meant. And I think that's the difference between someone like me who's a reaver and someone who's born Muslim. Understanding the gift that they have and not really appreciating that is something that is worthwhile having.